All right, folks, it's 7:31. Wanted to welcome everyone for joining us this morning to our Rockhurst Alumni Breakfast Series, the virtual edition. My name is Spencer Hardwick, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's very, very exciting discussion. The last time we all met, we were in person and really, really connected, and now we find ourselves in a very, very different time in a global pandemic. And we thought that given the nature of where we were, it would be really important to shine a light on alumni across the country who are doing some phenomenal work, particularly in different fields through the lens of entrepreneurship. So today we're looking forward to discussing with four very amazing and talented alumni to hear more about the challenges they're facing in their industry, the paths they chose in terms of entrepreneurship, and also, quite candidly, ways that we can continue to help and uplift them as a network. But before we do that, I did want to turn it over to our president, Mr. Dave.
Thanks, Spencer, and thanks, Spencer, to you for facilitating today, and thanks to our alumni board for running the Alumni Breakfast Series. And special thanks to Adam and Ernest, Max, and Matt for joining us this morning. I'm at the very end of this. I thought I could make myself available for anybody who had questions about either Rockhurst today or the start of our school year, but that's not the purpose of the breakfast. So I'd like to start us with a prayer. We told our faculty and staff when we came back for meetings, kind of like the old Sesame Street, this school year is brought to you by the letter P: pandemic, procedures, protocols, protection, and we've re-engineered school in so many different ways. But I think one of the things that I'd offer in a reflection and a quick prayer this morning is persistence. The need for persistence in our prayer. So Saint Augustine is probably somebody that you've heard of. He's one of the greater thinkers from the 3rd century of the church, and his mother was Saint Monica. And today is the memorial of Saint Monica, and in the Catholic tradition of saints being intercessors, she is the patron saint of wives and abuse victims. She was married to a pagan husband who had a very domineering pagan mother-in-law, and she was a Christian. And she was known for her persistent prayer, and she had 3 children. And one of them, Augustine, went the way of his father for much of his life, but came back to be one of the greatest founding fathers of Christianity in the 3rd century. All 3 of her children Christians. And so I think she's a model for us of persistence. And in our present moment, in a school year brought to us by the letter P, we need that persistence. We need that persistence to manage our way through months and months of health, worry, concern, and real catastrophe. We need that prayer for the persistence to work through the division in our country, the polarization, the racial tension, the division that happens. We need that persistent prayer to remind ourselves as men who are educated at a Jesuit institution that participation and not simply stating proxies is the engagement that our world needs from us. And so let's pray together this morning in the memorial of Saint Monica, a model of persistence for each one of us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Through the intercession of Saint Monica, we ask you, Lord, for persistence in our lives, as husbands and fathers, as business leaders, as community members, as people who work to sow your gospel, reflecting the good work of Rockhurst High School for God's greater honor and glory. And we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate those words to open us up. I want to give folks just a general sense of what the format's going to be this morning. Again, we have 4 talented alumni that are joining us. They're each going to have about 10 to 12 minutes. I'm going to ask them a few questions to begin, but then as they begin talking and you begin hearing about their fantastic journeys, be thinking of questions that you would like to ask on your own. Towards maybe the 6 or 7 minute mark, we want to begin to have Q&A from our audience. We're approaching 50 folks from around the country joining us. We're super heartened by that. So if you could use the Q&A function to add in questions as we learn about each alumni's journey, we're going to make sure that there's a little bit of time for you all to dialogue with and connect with each of these alumni. And so with that, I'm going to start us off with Mr. Adam Blake. So Adam, first of all, how you doing this morning?
Good.
Good. Let me get to your appropriate slides quickly here. I think it would be helpful if you could just start by talking about your background kind of as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so I was class of 2003 at Rockhurst. I went to school down at TCU in Fort Worth and got started pretty young, my freshman year, doing real estate deals. So that was really my first business. Started doing student housing, quickly got up into larger commercial real estate, specifically multifamily, sourcing capital from institutional investors. And that's really kind of where I cut my teeth and learned business. I also started another business in college that was sourcing and reselling consumer solar products online. So that kind of exposed me to internet businesses and operating companies outside of real estate. So I did that real estate for a number of years. And then in 2010, I moved back from Texas to Kansas City. And that's when I started a business called BrighterG. And BrighterG was an energy service technology company, most known for commercial solar projects. And that was a total roller coaster. So it was at its peak about a 50 million revenue business, 10 million EBITDA, operating in 17 states, 4 offices, maybe 100 employees, another 200 dedicated contractors. So it was quite the beast. And that sold that business in 2016. That business also had a ton of lows. So I learned a lot about what I like to do in business and what I don't want to do. And then I rolled right into a company called Zego shortly thereafter. And that business was using AI and IoT technology to try and automate the management of large apartment complexes. So the vision was to really get rid of on-site property managers using technology to basically run these properties. And that business was sold in 2019 to a company called Paylease. They are one of the large industry incumbents. They provide payment technology for about 12 million rental units in the US. They've since adopted the Zego name, which is pretty cool. And Paylease is owned by Vista Equity Partners. And if you don't know Vista is the largest B2B software private equity firm in the US. They have a really unique approach and some pretty cool, just a secret sauce, I would say. So that was a real incredible experience doing the transaction with Vista. So stayed on with Vista for a little bit, but I've basically been taking time off for the last year to really think about what I'm going to do next. I've been doing a lot of investing. Probably 7 or 8 years ago, I got into investing in early stage technology companies, and that's been a lot of fun for me. So I've been spending most of my time the last year doing that, but really was out in San Diego on an extended vacation for the most part. So not currently running a business right now for the first time, really since I was 18 years old, just trying to slow down and really kind of think about what I'm going to do next.
Well, it sounds like that R&R you're taking is very well deserved. I know we both know a ton of Rockhurst alum. I don't know many, if any, who founded 2 different companies. Can you talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you took from founding each of those ventures and just kind of, what are your current reflections for what you want to do next?
Yeah, so I mean, like literally every lesson you can imagine, started off really young with no experience. I've never actually worked in a real business. So, all the basic mistakes like getting partnership agreements in writing, being careful who you go into business with, for example, or some of the early lessons that I learned. And really, I think now reflecting on kind of where I'm at today, it's all about I used to care about making money. Like that's really all I wanted to do. And that was really my early 20s and mid 20s was focused on money. And now, you pretty quickly realize that you want to be 100% passionate and in love with what you're doing, because I don't know about everybody else, but when I'm running a company, it's literally all I think about. It doesn't matter if I wake up in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4 o'clock, like I'm thinking about work and I probably can't go back to sleep. So I want it to be something that I'm really passionate about. And I had that with my last business with Zego. It was a really cool industry. I love being in multifamily real estate. So, I think whatever I do next, I just want to make sure that not only does it needs to check all the boxes, something that I'm passionate about, but also something that has pretty big market potential.
Makes a lot of sense. Can you talk a little bit about how Rockhurst either has been helpful, or as you kind of move forward thinking about your next thing, how the network in the school could be helpful to entrepreneurs like you?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of Rockhurst. I'll just start by saying that. I think it's an extremely competitive environment. It does a great job instilling work ethic, values, and ethics. So I love Rockhurst. And one kind of cool story is when I moved back to Kansas City and started BrighterG, I provided a gift to Rockhurst to install solar on the roof. And it ended up turning out to be like the best business development thing that BrighterG ever did, just because of the profile of Rockhurst and some media attention that it got. And then Father Baum went on to probably provide, this isn't a joke, 50 different references for the company. So that was incredible. And I think through that, I just got kind of my name attached to Rockhurst. So it would always come up in conversation and in business. So I met a lot of people over the years that were other Rockhurst alum. And there was a VP of sales for BrighterG that was kind of front row for that whole deal and got to see the value of Rockhurst. And his kids are probably only like 10 years old or so, but he's 100% sending his kids to Rockhurst. So it was pretty cool to watch somebody else that grew up in Kansas City, but not directly affiliated with Rockhurst, just see kind of the power of the brand, how the alumni are willing to help each other, and, just decided that I'm going to send my kids there for sure.
Absolutely. We're actually starting to get a few questions on the line. One's coming in, says, given your experience, Adam, where do you see the commercial and residential property business coming out of this?
Yeah, so I think you really have to break it down by asset class. I mean, multifamily, for example, is doing pretty good, but we've also had all this, unprecedented stimulus and government programs that are allowing people to pay their rent. So if you talk to companies like Zego, for example, that are processing rent payments across 10 plus million units, it's like you wouldn't even know that we're in a pandemic. So, that asset class is doing just fine. Deals are trading again. But then if you look at like office and retail, those asset classes are getting crushed. And I say crushed, I mean, just M&A transaction activity there is grinded to a halt because nobody knows what's going to happen. Industrial appears to be doing just as strong as it was before, if not stronger. So, I think initially March, April, May, deal flow just ground to a halt because everybody wanted to wait and see what's happening. But now, things are coming back. So I think it's asset class by asset class. I would stay away from retail and office for the time being, just because there's a lot of uncertainty there. But otherwise, I think it's good, especially how the whole housing sector is really strong, just because the demographics are there to support household formation and not enough supply of homes. So I think anything in the single family rental, the multifamily rental, just habitational space is really great.
We also noted that you kind of bounced around a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about the advantages or just like the different nuances of building a company or operating a company in Kansas City versus other parts of the country?
Yeah, so I was living down in Texas for school, and that's an incredibly entrepreneurial environment. Nothing bad to say about Texas whatsoever. And I came back to Kansas City just because that's where I'm from, and that's where it made sense to start BrighterG. And then, a couple, thoughts there. So I'll start by talking a little about venture capital backed companies, because that's really a unique asset class. And the venture category is you put institutional, millions of dollars behind a startup business with the plans of basically taking it to a multi-hundred to potentially multi-billion-dollar business. Investors do not want to invest in those companies unless they can get 10 to 100 times their money. So, I'm not saying it's like the best asset class, it's just a unique asset class. And that's where, you can really start to make an argument that Kansas City is not the best city to build that type of business in, because you just don't have a lot of companies weren't born here. You don't have a lot of, high growth companies that have gotten to a couple thousand employees and IPO'd here like you do in the coast. You go to San Francisco, Boston, Seattle, even Austin, and some other up and coming cities, or Denver. You've got, 10 or 20 of those venture backed unicorn type businesses that you don't have in KC. So that's definitely the knock. And when I was raising venture funding for Zego, for example, I literally had a guy say, I want to invest in you, but you got to move the company to San Francisco. So that was a pretty common thing. All that being said, I moved out to San Diego back in June of last year with the intention on staying for a couple of years because I love San Diego. We had a cool spot in Coronado, but we ended up coming back early, back to Kansas City, because I want to start another company at some point here in the near future. And I truly believe that Kansas City is one of the best places to do it. It's clearly a great place to raise kids, but it's also a great place to hire talent and retain talent. You start hiring people in Boston and San Francisco, and I know this from experience, it's much harder to retain because there's just so much more competition with big companies out there. So, my experience has been that Kansas City is an incredible place to build a software company. I think it gets a little bit more debatable when you're really in that high growth mode as far as hiring executive level and manager level talent that's been there, done that. Yep. So that's my only kind of knock or concern about building a venture backed company in KC. But otherwise, it's an awesome place to do it.
I can definitely understand that. Adam, I'd be remiss if we didn't take a question here from the mayor of KNCK, Mr. David Alvey. He asked, how can I interest you in rebuilding neighborhoods in the Kansas City, Kansas area?
Man, real estate guys love incentives. So, I don't know. We can take that offline, but yeah, it's really cool to see Mr. Alvey, who's dean when I was at school there, the mayor of KCK now. I don't have any magic bullets for you other than real estate developers love free money.
I can understand that. There've been already a lot of full circle conversations that are happening here. We have we'll have time for a couple more questions. There's one here from Mr. Jim Dunn. Adam, how do you stay connected with former classmates, given everything that you're doing these days? I know you talked a little bit about how you've seen that as you built out these businesses, but are there other ways that you find yourself staying in touch?
Yeah, so I do business with a lot of former classmates and a lot of investing. Some of them. That's the best way for me to do it, just because I'm so passionate about business and investing. So that's one way. But my best friends are guys that I met in high school. So I think that's been pretty cool. Having my high school friends, my college friends, and some of my best friends are Rockhurst guys.
The last thing we actually have is from Mr. Larry Freeman. He just says, wish a happy birthday to your brother, Adam, who's class 2004. So as you can see, our alumni department is very, very good at keeping folks connected and staying up to date. Any parting words to the network or different ways we can support David? First, we just want to thank you for the time this morning, but as we close out, anything else you'd like to say?
I told David this before, but I just ask for help where you need it. I'm willing to help. I think other alumni would say the same thing. And we're all really passionate about Rockhurst. It played such a big role, at least for me, developing some of my kind of earlier foundations and whatnot. And I'm willing to do, whatever it is that you need. But overall, I'm super happy that David's here involved, and, kind of look forward to watching what he's going to do to try and take Rockhurst to the next level.
Well, Adam, we really appreciate your time. We understand you just bought a new place, getting settled in. I want to thank you again for this morning. Appreciation and good luck with the rest of the way.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Absolutely. We're now going to flip over to the class of 2009, Mr. Max Kaniger, who has a very, very interesting model in terms of an organization. Max, how are you this morning, sir?
I'm doing great. It's really good to be here and have this opportunity. I appreciate you inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, Max, you've generated quite a buzz here locally with Canbies Markets. Can you tell us a little bit about the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really kind way to describe it. Canbies Market is a nonprofit organization that I founded to help eliminate food deserts, or areas without consistent access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food. And we do that by partnering with and supporting small business owners that are already working in those communities. So we go to the little mom and pop corner convenience store and we install all of the equipment or refrigeration they need to make selling healthy food possible. And then we also bring in and restock that food for them 7 days a week on consignment. So it's no risk to them as a small business owner trying to make it by. And it also means that we get to retain control over the quality and the price of the food that's on our shelves. Really, our goal is just to make more healthy food available in the neighborhoods that need it.
Yeah, and what do you find as a particular, there's obviously a lot going on with the pandemic. What do you find your biggest focus being these days, given where you are with your ventures growth and kind of the different dynamics that you're seeing play out across Kansas City?
These days, it's weird. Just as I'm sure it is for a lot of people, it's just weird to manage. And we've really, the past few months, just pivoted to use our experience in distribution and managing fresh produce to get it out in a lot of different ways. And so we've started doing a lot of home delivered meals to people who can't make it to our stores. We've also started working more directly with other nonprofits in the community. So instead of just having at our, we're now at 29 different retail locations. We also are working with about 55 other nonprofits. So our distribution increased from, we were doing about 6,000 to 8,000 pounds of fresh produce a week in February. Since March, we've been averaging a little over 100,000 pounds a week. So it's been busy, but we're just trying to do everything we can to get food where it's needed because a lot of people need it right now.
Max, we had a really good conversation a few weeks ago about the model and kind of how it situates. Can you talk a little bit more, as you did with me, about how you kind of situate yourself next to these larger grocery stores, kind of why you made the decisions you made around getting food to folks this way as opposed to doing something that might be like a Price Chopper or a Safeway or some of these larger big box brands?
Yeah, well, that was actually my original idea when I knew I wanted to work on this issue of food access, was to build a full-size nonprofit supermarket. But as I kind of learned more about that model and about the communities that I'm working in, I realized why there aren't as many of those supermarkets in these neighborhoods, and that kind of expecting some of those Price Choppers or the Cosentino's family to step in and support it in a way in an area that model really isn't sustainable isn't really fair to them either. And so that's where I kind of wanted to pivot and see what does work. And what I saw is, so east of Troost is mainly where we work in KC. In these food desert areas, there are 6 full-size supermarkets, but there's over 600 corner convenience stores. So that just seemed like an existing infrastructure that was too good to pass up. And working with people that already knew the neighborhood, a lot of these are owned by one, the person lives in the community. They live right around the corner from their store. They know the people in the neighborhood. It just seemed like a lot better way to connect directly with the customer and to make a bigger impact quicker. It also is something that, for example, that Sunfresh that was built recently on 31st and Prospect took about 6 years, and I've heard upwards of $17 million to build. And less than 2 years later, it's already needing another nearly $400,000 from the city to help manage cash flow. Where for us and the equipment we install, it's about $2,500, and we can really spread that food around a lot quicker.
We got a question on the line here from Pat McInerney. He says, how should local government support the efforts of Canbies or other organizations dedicated to eliminating food deserts?
Well, as a small, young startup organization, cash is always a really great way to support us. But as from a government or local government standpoint, any ways that they can help us, really regulatory. We are handling food, and especially during this pandemic, we've really tried to pivot and offer a lot of new things and new products, but getting the health department in here and working directly with them and making sure that we are being safe with how we're managing some of these new products is important, but it's just been hard to get in touch with people. And so having some support from the city that way could be really helpful. Also, like CDBG or community development block grants would be really helpful. We do our best to hire drivers that have either been recently released from prison or are veterans struggling to find work, or people from the community who struggle to get a job. Our starting salary is $16.50 an hour, and all I really need of somebody to work here is that they show up on time and are ready to work.
We've got a really good question on the line from Jim Cox. I'm going to try to come back to it for Matt and Ernest. Have you experienced a business setback that made you consider an alternative career? And if so, what kept you moving forward with the business? I just want to say, I think this question is particularly powerful. I think there are a lot of us on the line who are either interested in or have built something in the past. And there's inevitably probably a moment where you kind of have to really reckon with your choice. So can you speak a little bit to that, Max?
Yeah, there's, constant setbacks. I think anybody who started a business can kind of empathize with the really big highs and lows of starting a new business. Just in the past couple weeks, there have been some really, really great highs and some really, really big lows. And I think for me in this one, in this business here, it's the people on the other end that keep me going. There are definitely times where I felt like, what am I thinking? I don't have any business doing this. I don't really know the food industry as well as I should. I'm not the right person for this. But then just making sure that I'm getting out into the neighborhood as much as I can and getting to spend time with people and hearing directly from them how impactful it's been is really what keeps me pushing forward.
Jamie asked, what was the biggest hurdle in obtaining status as a nonprofit for you?
Paperwork. All of the, thankfully for us though, Kansas City being the community that it is, we had a lot of support earlier on, both from UMKC. Actually, there was a few of my Rockhurst classmates that have been with me basically since the beginning. One of my classmates is an accountant at PwC, and he helped with a lot of kind of the financial planning that took place. And then we got all of the legal support we needed pro bono from both Stinson and Hush Blackwell.
Yeah, I want you to talk a little bit more about that. When I looked at your team, I know we've connected a few times. There's been a lot of Rockhurst influence or touch points in that. Are there other ways that Rockhurst has been helpful? And are there additional ways that we can be helpful? I know you mentioned donating and, finding work for folks earlier, but just want to be thoughtful and conscious about how has the school been helpful in the past and what can we do moving forward?
I mean, helpful in the past, it's helpful every day. We are a team of 16 now on staff here, and like full-time staff, and 6 of them are Rockhurst alumni from within about 4 years of me graduating. So we would have all been in the building at about the same time. So I'm constantly getting help daily from my old Rockhurst classmates. But I think the reason we've been able to grow as well as we have is the network that Rockhurst provides, and the references that when I'm calling some of the people that we need to get in touch with to support our organization, I'm not just cold calling them, I'm calling them with a reference from somebody else that gets to make that introduction for us. And that's really powerful. And going forward, just kind of continuing to help us do that, to help spread the word about the work that we're doing and what we're trying to do is, I think, the best thing that Rockhurst as a community could do for us.
Pete has a question of, do you offer job opportunities, particularly for urban youth?
I'm still struggling with the youth aspect of it, just because we do have forklifts and heavy equipment going around our warehouse. But our goal is to try and work with as many people from the community as possible. It's also been tricky due to COVID. I've tried to keep our staff as lean as possible, just because I don't want as many people in the building as we can avoid it. Yeah, but I mean, short answer, yes, we are trying to work with as many urban youth as possible. Typically, we actually try and help provide them with opportunities at some of the urban farms or community gardens that we purchase from.
Makes a lot of sense. We hear a lot about some of the best advice that young entrepreneurs and innovators get. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe some of the worst advice that you might have gotten over the past few years?
The worst advice I've gotten over the past few years? Well, I got a lot of, when I was first approaching people about this, was that it was not going to work and just to give up and go do something else. I also got a lot of people that offered me jobs and said that you don't want to start your own business, that's no fun, and you should just work here. I would say that was not great advice, because I'm pretty happy with where I get to be every day. I mean, I do. I also love what I do, and I enjoy coming to work and getting to wake up and come to the warehouse, and the team that we've built is I feel really lucky to be in the spot that I'm in. And I think if I would have taken the quick way out and just gotten a job, wouldn't have been the best advice.
And it sounds like over the past few years, you've developed a really strong understanding of the grocery and food market. What is one of the bigger misconceptions that you think folks may have about the industry as a whole?
That this one answer can solve all the problems. I mean, the supermarket is really, really great at what it does, and providing good food more accessible and more affordable to most people, but it is not the magic bullet. It is not the catch-all to how we feed everybody, and just being open to capitalism and that process of innovation and trying out new and different things and letting them work.
Max, just want to again say thank you, and particularly thank you for providing a service in something that's sorely needed, especially during these really, really tough economic times. We'll continue to support you, and thank you again for your time today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been great getting to see everybody.
100%.
Hey, Spencer, real quick.
Sure.
I think, does Adam, do you have a question or comment? I get a little hand up notification from you in your box.
Yeah, I did that whenever you were asking the question about Setback. So, my comment there is that being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster. Within like a day or two, you'll go from being on top of the world to literally just wanting to quit. And in my experience, the best thing to do is to have some sort of source of inspiration or pain to be able to dig deep. That way, you have something to go to. And I know for me, it was just my whole kind of upbringing and seeing my dad lose his job, and then just the spiral effect that it had on him and our entire family. So that's been kind of my source of drive and helped me, when times are tough, but it's just inevitable. And I've also observed with other entrepreneurs, it doesn't necessarily need to be a source of pain specifically, but having some sort of inspiration and passion kind of behind you will just make it so much easier to get out, of the dumps, because it's going to happen.
Really appreciate that perspective and context, Adam. And Robbie, thanks for that heads up. I couldn't see their hand raised, so if those continue to happen, just feel free to interrupt me, and we'll get those folks towards the spotlight. We're now going to flip over to Ernest McCoy, class of 2006. And Ernest is the founder and chief pilot at Alt Spec UAS. Ernest, tell us a little bit more about what you've been up to.
First of all, good morning. Thanks for having me. So Alt Spec UAS is an aerial data acquisition and processing company. We utilize drone technology to capture videos, photos, LiDAR data, and in some cases translate that into a secondary output that can inform asset owners and in some cases save lives. Back in 2015, I was a business analyst for Burns & McDonnell, and the FAA released a set of guidelines regarding how to utilize drones commercially. And so I saw an opportunity to leverage my background as an engineer, as a hobbyist, flying drones, as well as my private pilot's license, which at the time was a requirement to fly drones, and really create a unique set of additional services for existing Burns & Mac customers. So I worked to grow that within Burns & Mac, grow that business. And finally in 2018, there was a family-driven need to sort of make some changes and have some more flexibility. So, I found myself at the crossroads and realized that now's the time to either take that chance and bet on myself and do something I've always wanted to do, or forever live in regret. So I stepped away from Burns & Mac and started working Alt Spec full-time. Today, one of the biggest sort of initiatives that we serve is helping electric utilities inspect their electrical distribution and transmission assets. I know many of you guys are aware of Camp Fire that happened in Northern California back in 2019, and all of the destruction it caused and loss of life. And so one of the greatest pieces of fulfillment I get out of doing what I do is knowing that, the inspection work that I do can potentially save lives and minimize damage for our society.
Ernest, you find yourself in a particularly intriguing industry. Where do you see, or what role do you see drones playing over the next 5, 10, 15 years? I think we've all seen different demonstrations of their capability and capacity, but as someone who's really into the weeds in the industry, where do you see things going with drones in particular?
Yeah. So I think us as a society, we're just now scratching the surface in terms of what drones can be used for. Honestly, the applications are so limitless. There's talk of establishing temporary networks for third world countries or and disaster scenarios. There's obviously the work that I'm doing now in inspection, and it's being used for precision agriculture. There are countless ways that I think us as society will begin to utilize this technology to really, provide extra value and make life much better for us all.
And I think this, if I recall, this was founded in 2018. What kind of, where do you find yourself in the growth cycle of your business now? What's your biggest focus these days?
Yeah, scaling. So a lot of times companies need a time-sensitive problem to kind of force them to innovate and adapt new technology. And as a provider of a solution or a service that caters to a certain segment of emergency or urgent issues, I find it hard to meet the scope and schedule of clients. For instance, right now, I have a long-standing client that I'm waiting to hear back from any second, any minute about, the number of crews I need to mobilize to the West Coast. And it's possible that I would have to do so in the next week or so. So you guys can imagine what kind of difficulty that poses. So right now I'm just trying to figure out how to scale in a way that I can be flexible and meet customer demands, but also not carry too much excessive overhead as well.
You're kind of the second entrepreneur to talk about, being in a different market, so to speak. Can you talk to a little bit, are there differences in clientele? I know you've done business in California, obviously you're here now. Do you find differences in clientele in different markets, or given the nature of what you do, is the need kind of the same across the country and across different markets?
Very great question. So right now, and I mentioned the work that I'm doing in utility, and honestly, that was driven by necessity and unfortunately disaster. So I am doing a lot of work in California, and that's a direct result of the wildfires that have happened over there in the last few years. So it's really forced utilities to take a look at their inspection and asset maintenance because nobody wants that liability. Nobody wants to be the cause of loss of life and damage. So I think also, the regulatory environment in California and just more of a progressive mentality just kind of enables utilities out there to be more progressive and to kind of take the forefront and use drone technology to figure out what the limits and benefits of it are. So hopefully throughout time, the adoption in the utility space it's already starting to see it a little bit, will start to migrate across the rest of the country as well.
Jamie has a question. As an engineer, what's been the most difficult part of managing a business?
I am super analytical. I'm a problem solver by nature, which is awesome. You can apply the scientific method and some of the things I learned in engineering school to solve issues. But at the same time, sometimes you can overthink things. And, when it came to making the jump into entrepreneurship, I had this whole list of pros and cons. And if I did this, then what about this? And, as an entrepreneur, sometimes you have to just rely on your gut. I've always felt inside of me that, I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I've always had businesses, even as a kid, selling candy and washing cars and mowing lawns. And so it's something that I want to do. And fortunately in my situation, taking that risk and trusting my gut instinct played out well for me.
And then we have another question. The regulatory framework around drones has changed a lot. Has it been a hindrance, or are you able to impact regulations to make them work for your business?
Yeah. So thankfully the FAA, usually before they make any regulatory changes, they have an open comment period where the general public can submit their thoughts. So you got individuals, you got hobbyists, you got people in the corporate world on the forefront of drone delivery and really trying to take this tool and make it widespread throughout our society. Amazon, you got educational institutions. And so luckily, the FAA provides us an opportunity to give input and help mold the regulatory framework. But I will say that it's been good or bad, good and bad. As I mentioned before, it used to be a requirement to have an actual private pilot's license to fly drones commercially. And that was awesome for me because I had one, and it raised the barriers of entries to, other people who wanted to get into it. Since then, they've changed the requirement, and it's a matter of a test that gives you a commercial license. So you see a lot more people entering into the field, but this space is something that feel like I'm uniquely qualified for, and so for me, it's just a matter of making sure I communicate that to my clients and make them realize that I'm the best choice for whatever their needs are.
And Ernest, you've been pretty involved with Rockhurst since graduating, namely kind of leading a drone camp or helping to lead a drone camp here at Rockhurst. Gus has a question saying, as Rockhurst advances its STEAM programs, what skills do you think schools need to pass along to students?
Well, first of all, I think it's awesome that Rockhurst is stepping into the STEAM world. I have in the past been a mentor for the robotics class there, competition that's held in Kansas City. Again, we talked about problem solving. Obviously, I remember at Rockhurst, I took a class with Mr. Murphy. I forget what it was called now, but we talked about and learned about construction. So, how to build a house, what stud spacing should look like, things of that nature. And that was one of the things that kind of furthered my desire to get into engineering, but also taught me a lot of useful information that I can later apply in life. So, having advanced classes as well, I think is beneficial. So I was able to take physics at Rockhurst, which was a difficult class, but B, made me going into college and taking that class a lot easier as well. So having exposure to advanced classes as well, I think is good to help, excite people who are interested into engineering, but also give them a leg up when it comes to that next level of education.
Yep, just a little bit of background for folks on the call. STEAM refers to an educational approach involving science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. Ernest, as we kind of round things out, are there ways in particular that Rockhurst has been or can be helpful to you as you continue to grow out and scale your business? Yeah,
Rockhurst has been extremely beneficial for me. One of the biggest things, honestly, right now is motivation. I feel fortunate to be a part of a community where so many people are doing incredible things, even outside of entrepreneurship, corporate world, education, public service, not-for-profit. So seeing other people's excel really motivates me and pushes me to continue to work hard and excel myself. In terms of what Rockhurst can do is along the same lines, just connection and network. So if there's anybody out there that feels compelled, I don't really do social media, but I am on LinkedIn. So if you feel compelled, feel free to reach out, and you never know what ideas can be sparked from a random chance conversation.
Last thing real quick, in 30 seconds or left, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so I get a lot of fulfillment out of building things and bringing ideas to life. And so because of that, I'm confident that Alt Spec won't be the only business that, I participate in or found for the rest of my life. So I'm hoping that in the next 5 to 10 years, I can do what I said before. I can learn how to scale in a manner that allows me to divert some of my time and attention to other ideas and endeavors and build something else.
Ernest, really appreciate your time, and best of luck as you continue to build out a very intriguing business. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So as we'll get to the last quarter of the call here, what we've done thus far is we've tried to see entrepreneurs from across the spectrum, folks who are just starting their business, folks who have kind of exited different businesses and looking for something different. We wanted to kind of cap things this morning with someone who's at a larger scale business and who's at the helm of that business currently. So we're very excited to also be joined by the CEO of YETI, and that is Mr. Matt Reintjes. Good morning, Matt. How are you doing this morning?
Hey, Spencer. Good morning.
Matt, can you tell us a little bit about YETI and what you guys do?
Yeah, I mean, I first have to say, I feel like I should give my 15 minutes back to Adam, Max, and Ernest because I'm at a stand-up desk. I want to pull up a chair and listen. It is, I feel like there's maybe a little bit of a setup. It's hard to back clean up to three entrepreneurs doing three very different things. I'm more of a hired help kind of guy. I come in and I've had fortunate chance to transition, YETI being the latest, but transition 8 founder-led companies. And so I get the immense privilege to take somebody else's dream and move on. So feel incredibly fortunate and feel really lucky to be at YETI, where in very consistent fashion with what we just heard, it was a company that was founded by 2 brothers back in 2006, and much like a lot of what was talked about, it was all passion based. So the business started not because they were looking to build the next great company, but because they were avid outdoorsmen and fishermen, and they wanted to build a lifestyle that supported what the real avocation was. And they did that and and I think it translated through the product, it translated through the business. Started in 06. They sold the company in 2012 to a private equity firm, stayed involved. And then about 5 years ago, I left Kansas City, which was one of the harder decisions. I have deep Rockhurst roots and deep family roots in Kansas City, but had this unique chance to see something in still its infancy in YETI. Even though they've had some success, they were so early on the curve of what they could do that I broke the dreams of my 3 boys of becoming Rockhurst students, and have been chasing ever since. So picked the business up in 2015, transitioned the founder leadership team. What was unique about it, and it's interesting to have 3 really successful entrepreneurs who've gone through cycles. I walked into a founder leadership team that looked at me and said, "We're done. Like, we've had a great run. We love this business. We love this brand. We care so much about it that we want to step back and step out." And that was the 2 brothers that founded the business and literally almost their entire leadership team. And they just said, "This has grown so far beyond where we're ready." And so it was the most successful transition I've ever been a part of, because the founders believed in the mission of the business more than they were tied to their own pride and ego in it. And I think there's some big public company examples of founders who've hung on too long, who couldn't let that go. And I say that with an immense amount of respect for entrepreneurs and an immense amount of respect for founders. But businesses at different stages sometimes require different things. And I was fortunate and am fortunate to work with 2 incredible entrepreneurs and founders. So I feel like I'm relatively uniquely qualified to talk about entrepreneurs from the other side of the picture. But we got a blast at YETI. It's been like everything else, like all good high growth companies. It's a roller coaster. I came into YETI in 2015, and they couldn't keep up. It was just flat out in the business. And I told the owners at the time, I said, "This thing's going to be a roller coaster, and we're going to ride it." And we have. And COVID's the latest of those things to come our way. So, we're based in Austin, Texas. No Vista Equity based down here. So no, as Adam referenced, great group here in Austin.
Matt, I think you hit on something really, really important, kind of the delineation between a founder and handling a business at a more mature phase of the cycle. Can you kind of help us understand what are kind of some of the different traits that you're more likely to find in a founder of a venture company, and ones that you're more likely to find in someone like yourself who's more apt at growing or building it into its next phase?
Yeah, I mean, I think in founders and entrepreneurs, as we saw in this call, come in all different types and all different passions and all different skill sets. I think the biggest transition that's hard for founders I've seen in my past is where they are the central node and everything flows through them. Decisions, engagement, because they're really setting the vision for the organization. As you get bigger and complexity increases, and you have to start bringing in skill sets that have trail dust and have reps at having seen a wider variety of things. I think that's sometimes a hard transition for founders and for entrepreneurs to kind of give up that. From my perspective, I'm an operator. And so I love to have people on my team that are smarter about all the stuff they do than I am, because that means that we've gotten to a level where we can bring in really highly engaged talent. So it's a little bit of that transition, simply put, from generalist to specialist. You know, when I came into YETI, we didn't have a director of tax. I couldn't operate without a director of tax today. One of the two founders of YETI is famous for saying, why do we need a sales team if we can sell everything we make? And that was their reality at one point. But that reality doesn't always exist. And so obviously we built a sales team. And I think there's a lot of those things that just become that evolution. And I think the mantra we've tried to drive is we want to be in control, but with an entrepreneurial fire. So we don't ever want to lose, because there's such a magic to entrepreneurs and having an entrepreneur mindset, but you need to operate in control. And I think in the bets just get bigger and bigger. Roy, who's the founder of YETI, we were talking last week about something. He said the biggest change, he still sits on our board. He said the biggest change is we used to make a lot of decisions really quickly, because if we made more good ones than bad ones, it all worked out. The magnitude of decisions as you scale just get bigger and bigger. And so the missteps have greater and greater risk. And so you always want to keep that more pluses than minuses, but that understanding of, you don't just, in our world, you don't just change a price, or you don't just decide, I don't like that, I'm going to move, because there could be, you know, at scale, there could be millions and millions of dollars of decisions made in that. And I think we've also had not just founders, but we've had people in the organization that just didn't scale. To put it quickly in context, we were a business that went from, you go all the way back, started in 2006, did about $1 million in its first year. In 2014, we did 90 million. 2015, we did 150, then we did 450, then we did 800 in 4 years. So we went from 90 to 800 million in 4 years.
Yeah.
We outstripped the people. I mean, we had a controller, our highest ranking finance person, had never been in a business bigger than 50 million. And now he's got $800 million worth of problems. And so that's a little bit of growth is awesome, but it can sometimes structurally rattle a company.
Yeah, you talked about growth. You also talked about this notion of entrepreneurial fire. We got a great question from Matt Lavery, who says that, you know, YETI's obviously been super successful. I have a few YETI products myself. Now that there's so many copycats in your industry, how do you find yourself staying ahead of the market and keeping that entrepreneurial spirit / fire that the brothers started? Yeah,
we have an active legal department. At one point we were, I think, and this is back in 2016, I think we were one of the top 10 IP infringement filers in the US. I mean, up there with like Microsoft, and I mean, we do not have a big enough IP and litigation team that we should be filing that many. But at the time, it was just, we had to prove a point to the market. I think like a lot of things, you build an impression with a consumer as an innovator. Your product needs to live up to it, and then you need to continue to innovate and drive consumer passion. And consumers drive passion for brand. You know, I always use the example, you could get yoga pants at Kirkland or at Costco under the Kirkland brand, or you could get Fabletics with Kate Hudson, or you could go to, you know, Kalia or Carrie Underwood's at Dick's Sporting Goods. But people go to Lululemon because they believe in the brand, they believe in the innovation, they believe in the quality of the product, and it's just consistent. So the way you stay ahead of people who only fight for price is you continue to innovate, and you continue to make the brand richer than just the product. And I have to commend David for the advertisement he's showing in the top left. That's high quality work there. I mean, they truly are some pretty great products. We also know, Matt, that the Reintjes name has a long and very impactful history within Rockhurst. Can you talk a little bit you talked about your Kansas City roots. Can you talk, one, about how, you know, your family has really helped support you, provide you this foundation, but also how is Rockhurst kind of giving you the platform, the foundation necessary to lead one of the more successful and exciting businesses? Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe two of the most influential things in my life, besides my wife, are Rockhurst and my family. And what's interesting is my life, I didn't know anything but Rockhurst. I mean, by the time I was born, I had a brother who had already graduated from Rockhurst. I had 5 brothers who went ahead of me at Rockhurst, a brother who went behind me. My dad graduated in the great class in 1949. They had their 70th anniversary last year, and 25-ish of their classmates showed up for their 70th anniversary. I'm not sure my class of 93 had 25 show up at our last thing. It's amazing. And that's a group that still gets together for lunch. I think for the last 35 years, they have a standing lunch every month. So, you know, Rockhurst has been incredibly influential. My family has, I feel incredibly fortunate to be number 8 of 9 kids, which means I had 7 examples in front of me of, you know, good, of decisions, of life. And it would be hard to extract that learning. I think at Rockhurst, you know, maybe the best way to put it is I can't remember a single name of a professor I had in college. And I love my college experience, and I love my college roommates, and I can tell you specific stories about specific experiences at Rockhurst. I still remember a test question I got wrong on the English exam in Mr. Hagedorn's class on Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie. And the reason I remember it is because the question, I should have been able to answer that question if I had read the book. But it was like the ultimate, so I felt bad, like I let him down. And I also had this amazing life lesson, which is if you do the work, the answers will emerge. If you don't do the work, then you're just guessing. So I do know why he actually couldn't drive his camper into New York now. But it's just one of those things. And I mean, I remember Coach Bullard and Coach Gobin, who stopped coaching football after my sophomore year, pulling me into their office. They were no longer coaches on Coach Sev's staff. They pulled me into their office my junior year because I lost the starting job. And they said, if it matters to you, go fight for it. Like they were just observers. I mean, these are people who weren't actually on the field, but cared enough about the students. And I think about those Rockhurst lessons of, you know, I think Rockhurst teaches you confidence and the importance of confidence, the importance of competence, and then the amazing importance of empathy. And that combination of to be confident and to be confident and to be empathetic, for me is just stuff I've carried forward. And I think my family taught it. I think Rockhurst taught it. And, you know, I have a junior in high school right now and an 8th grader getting ready to go to high school. And unfortunately for Rockhurst, unfortunately for me, everything in my mind gets compared to the experience I had and the experience I watched at Rockhurst.
We're beginning to wind down here. Do want to say really quickly, Mr. Freeman says, happy 45th birthday. You celebrated 40th birthday last week. I also have a question here. What was your earliest and strangest memory at Rockhurst?
Yeah, so maybe we'll end with a touch of for some folks who've been around, Mr. Freeman included, and another wonderful Rockhurst family. That's the other cool part of Rockhurst is you see the family names just get circulated through time, because while the school has changed and the people have changed, the fundamental core value of men for others hasn't. So earliest memory, you know, I remember things like Sailorama, when Rockhurst used to have a carnival. You know, I remember when there was a senior smoking lounge at Rockhurst, which, I mean, how crazy is that to think that Rockhurst had a privilege, which was you could go smoke in the senior lounge. And I was a wee pup. But my memory, which I'll tie to something that's very relevant right now, is my brother Mark and my cousins Mike and Jeff Lewis were on the 1983 Rockhurst state championship game, which was also Coach Sev's first state championship. And I was 9 years old at that game. So long history. The strangest one I would say, and also tied to some more, you know, sad passing, but Father Tom Cummings, who passed away, he was president of Rockhurst at the time, passed away 11 days ago. I was standing in his office at Rockhurst for whatever reason. And I think it was a good reason, not I was standing in his office because of like excessive jug, but he and I watched live on TV the raid on the compound in Waco. Like, I don't know why I was in his office when the Branch Davidian raid happened, but like it was like just one of those odd moment in time. You remember where you were when, and I happened to be standing with Father Cummings in his office.
Well, Matt, we really appreciate you. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. It is 8:30. Any last words, parting words from you or any of our other entrepreneurs today?
No, I think I would just say what Ernest said, and I would echo it. You know, it's an amazing network we have. It's only strong because of what we're willing to do after we leave. So our LinkedIn's, email, If you're down in Austin, Texas, I'll buy you a breakfast taco and a beer, maybe separately. But no, I think we keep the alumni network keeps it strong. So to the group that put this on, thank you, and Spencer, thanks for hosting, and David, thanks for having us.
Thank you, guys. David, any last words?
I'm grateful. This has been an inspiring group to listen to, and you know, I think as educators, the hope for teachers and the hope for the Jesuits is you have guys who can go out and use their God-given talents to do good things and shape the world. So I'm grateful for everybody's time this morning. It's just been inspiring to listen to you guys and to watch the back and forth question and answer. And thanks again to you, Spencer, and the alumni board for putting it on.
Absolutely. I want to thank everyone. We appreciate everyone coming out. I did want to note that we are in a very significant moment right now with the global pandemic, civic unrest, police brutality, and really, really tough economic times. But the one thing we were all charged to do at graduation was to go make a difference in the world. So I'm very heartened by what these four have said. And we're going to continue to build on those things to continue making the world a greater place and a better place for folks to live in. So thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.